The Philadelphia Eagles reported for 2025 training camp today at the NovaCare Complex. Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, I'm going to give you 5 players that I'm watching the closest this summer.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome, Eagles fans, to this Tuesday edition of the show. We are brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 back in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. The Philadelphia Eagles reported today to NovaCare Complex to begin the 2025 season. Training camp practice begins this week. Can't believe football season is back, but we are here. We're actually only a week away from an actual game. The Hall of Fame game is on the 29th. It's the 22nd. So next week at this time, we will have a football game to watch. Football is in the air, and man, there's been a heat stroke going on in the Northeast. It feels like I was just down in Nashville, Tennessee, too, and the humidity down there. As much as I love summer, I've kind of had some heat fatigue, and I'm kind of ready for a nice chill 55-degree weather day with some football on Sunday, some Philadelphia Eagles football on Sunday, and we're going to be there before you know it. But their first game is going to be on Thursday night because the Eagles are reigning Super Bowl champions, so they take the Dallas Cowboys on the first game of the season, that Thursday night season opener. But there's a lot of work to be done before that game. Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni have to get this roster down to 53 players. And I think there's a lot of guys that could be surprise picks to make the team. And I want to talk about some of those players coming up on today's edition of the show. 5 my guys. You guys know the saying, my guys. I use that a lot during draft season for prospects that I would pound the table for the Eagles to draft. I'm going to do the same thing, the same concept for training camp. 5 guys that I think are going to turn heads, whether it's for a training camp battle to win a starting job or just to make the team, to make the 53. These are 5 players that I bet by the end of training camp, by the end of the preseason, I would be pounding the table for these guys to make the team or maybe even have a bigger role on the 2025 roster. So these are my 5 my guys for training camp. And the first player I want to talk about is UDFA running back out of Florida, Montrell Johnson. To show you the list, 1 through 5, number 2, wide receiver Danny Gray. And then I have some offensive linemen that I'm watching closely from this rookie class, Drew Kendall and Holland Pierce. And my 5th my guy, the only player on defense that I'm really enamored with watching this summer, that's not an obvious one, right, is cornerback Eli Ricks. If I put Jahad Campbell up there and Drew Makuba and Sidney Brown and Moro Ujoma, J-Wix Hunt, those just feel obvious. So these my guys were more zoomed in, focused role players, potential backups, guys on the bubble trying to make the 53. And let's start with Montrell Johnson, the running back, undrafted rookie out of Florida, Howie Roseman's alma mater. For me, Montrell Johnson is interesting because I don't think he's going to have any prominent role on this year's team. But A.J. Dillon, as I've said on a couple shows the last few weeks, I have no idea what they're going to get out of him. He hasn't played football in over a year. He missed all of the 2024 season because of a neck injury. In an ideal world, because of his style, his physical big frame, you want him as a potential backup to Saquon Barkley, especially when you have a more undersized backup in Will Shipley, also a part of that backfield. But again, I don't know. A.J. Dillon, I'm still getting PTSD from Rashad Penny back in 2023. I wouldn't be shocked at all if a Montrell Johnson, a more explosive player, ended up making this team. The Eagles have really good luck with UDFA running backs, not to a degree of they're a starting player that's a star, but hey, back-to-back years, 2017, 2018, they got a lot out of Corey Clement, including the biggest game of this franchise's history, Super Bowl 52, when he had 100 receiving yards in the big game. Josh Adams, although you kind of are like, ugh, when you hear that name, for a UDFA to lead your team in rushing in 2018, that's, again, reflective of how bad the backfield was that season. But for Josh Adams, that's a huge, that's a hit of a signing. For Josh Adams to have over 500 rushing yards in that season. So the Eagles have had good luck with UDFAs, especially at running back. And I think it is the easiest position to translate to the NFL level. It's why I think you see a lot of late round picks, a lot of undrafted players at running back make it compared to other positions. And I wouldn't be surprised if Montrell Johnson is that next player. I think he's really explosive, 4.42 speed. He was a big play creator at Florida. He had a knack for forcing missed tackles. I'm not predicting that he makes it over A.J. Dillon right now, as I said on my 53-man roster predictions yesterday. I do think it will be Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, A.J. Dillon. I don't think they'll carry a fourth running back like they would at times during the Doug Peterson era. I think it's just going to be three, especially with Saquon Barkley's workload. Like, they don't really do a committee approach anymore. But if there was one guy that could beat out A.J. Dillon, I personally believe that it would be Montrell Johnson. I do think even if he doesn't make the team, he could be that next Eagles running back that really shines during the preseason, that turns heads, and potentially gets a spot on another 53-man roster. So he's a my guy for sure on offense. I really like that signing coming out of Florida. And then my second guy is somebody I've mentioned quite a bit on this podcast. It's wide receiver Danny Gray, a former day 3 pick out of the University of SMU, was with the 49ers. I think this is a player that's really interesting for depth because, again, of his downfield speed. I think he is a builder when it comes to speed. Like, he really builds up long strides, a rangy receiver, like pretty good length. He's got really good sudden burst. I don't think he's the best route runner. I don't think he has the best hands. There's a reason that he's fighting for a job for the Eagles. He's fighting for a spot on the 53. But he's somebody that was a my guy for me coming out of the draft in 2021. And I think he could be somebody that, again, maybe you want that niche role of a downfield home run hitter on your depth chart. And if you have a guy like Johnny Wilson taking up a roster spot, he's a bigger, slower receiver. If you have somebody like him and then a possession receiver like Terrace Marshall, maybe you want to have the speed of Danny Gray, and I do think he could have return ability as well. I think he could be an interesting option as a kicker punt returner. I think he's going to battle Avery Williams potentially for that number 6 spot on this wide receiver core. It's going to be between like those 3 gadget receivers. I think there's one spot for Avery Williams, Danny Gray, and Anais Smith, right? I think it's almost going to be like 2 different battles at receiver. I think they're definitely keeping at least one of Johnny Wilson and Terrace Marshall. I think they could keep both, but I think those 2 are battling for that 4th and 5th spot. And then maybe there's 2, so maybe both those guys make it, but maybe only one does, and then maybe only 2 or 1 of this group makes it when it comes to the faster receivers, the more undersized guys. Anais Smith, Avery Williams, Danny Gray. I think they want to keep at least one of those players, and maybe they do keep Wilson and Marshall, or maybe they keep 2 of these guys, and Danny Gray has to beat out at least one of Anais Smith and Avery Williams. I think he's got the least, I think he has the least likely chance of those 3 because Anais Smith was a draft pick of Howie Roseman just a year ago, and he did make improvements in his rookie season down the stretch. Even though he had a bad summer, Howie Roseman did not cut him. And then Avery Williams has really good return experience, which Danny Gray does not. He's also potentially a player that can play both running back and receiver, which could also intrigue the Eagles enough to keep him on the team over Danny Gray. So of all these receivers I mentioned, he probably has the longest road to get to the 53, but he's a player that I personally really like, and I like that niche role of that speed potentially to complement the depth chart of a Johnny Wilson and a Terrace Marshall Jr. if they make the team, or an Anais Smith. I kind of like Danny Gray on this team as well. Another player, 2 players that I really am watching on the offensive line. Boston College day 3 pick Drew Kendall, a center/guard, played primarily center at the University of Boston College, but the Eagles did list him as a guard as well when they drafted him. Somebody that I think could compete for that right guard spot long term. And then Holland Pierce, who I mentioned a little bit yesterday, the UDFA out of Rutgers, 6'8", over 330 pounds, just 2 completely different styles of offensive line, right? Holland Pierce is a Mekhi Becton type of player, a King Dunlap on the field. Like, that's what he looks like, just a mammoth of a human being, has length and power. If Jeff Stoutland wants to go the Mekhi Becton route again at guard, yeah, he could go for Cameron Williams or Miles Hinton. Maybe, again, if he wants to convert a tackle into a guard this year, I think those 2 players from the day 3 class could be used. But Stoutland has already started to use Howland Pierce at guard. He started to use him at guard in the spring, and I think he could be somebody that makes this football team. And I'm just fascinated by a guy of that size and stature because, like, you don't see that kind of player come around very often, and he has just such an interesting skill set that I think Stoutland could develop into something. But then there's the other style of player maybe you want at guard, and Drew Kendall, who's more undersized. He's built more like a center. He's built kind of like Cam Jurgens and Jason Kelsey, but the way he gets upfield, the athleticism of Drew Kendall, the technique in zone blocking is really impressive. I wonder if Stoutland, again, after last year, I think he prefers a bigger guard, but Cam Jurgens held his own at right guard in 2023, and I wonder if Kendall could play his way onto the football field this year. I actually have a bold prediction. Tyler Steen's the favorite to win right guard. I think actually Drew Kendall's, of all these guys, could end up, and I'm going to say he will be. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. Drew Kendall's going to start more games at right guard for the Eagles this year than anybody. Hear me now, believe me later. He just looks like an Eagles offensive lineman, and even though the Eagles prefer a certain style of guard, I think, after last year with Becton, they have made this move in the past. They're not afraid of undersized linemen. I know putting him next to Jurgens might not be great for the run game, but I think Drew Kendall is going to be a player that makes up for his lack of size. And I think there's a reason the Eagles listed him as a guard and a center, because I think they do believe he can do both. So I'm watching both those guys really closely in camp. Completely different styles of player that could fit into that right guard spot. And that's why I'm intrigued by both of them. I want to see what Jeff Stoutland kind of prefers and how those two develop. I think they're both very interesting, versatile pieces. Again, Kendall can play center and guard. Howland Pierce can play guard and tackle. I think at least one of them is making the team, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of them start a lot of games this year. I think of those four rookies on the offensive line, including Cameron Williams and Miles Hinton, I think one of them is going to play this year. I think they're going to play pretty well. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat out Kenyon Green and Matt Pryor for roster spots this year. I wonder if the Eagles are just going to go really young on the offensive line. And then one other guy that I'm watching, another training camp my guy for me, is Eli Ricks. I'm still very intrigued by Ricks' skill set. I love the length. I love the speed. Year 3 in this system, in this organization's defense. Again, year 2 with Vic Fangio. I think the Eagles are still high on Ricks. I think they're still bullish. I think he showed more versatility his rookie year than they thought he had as a slot potential corner that could help out if Cooper DeJean were to ever get injured or move around the formation. And I honestly think Eli Ricks might end up being better than Adoree Jackson this year. So I'm still bullish on Eli Ricks. He was a my guy for me 2 years ago. I know he was buried on the depth chart last year, but I kind of want to see, because we didn't really get to see Ricks a lot last year, and now he's going to get more reps because the cornerback group saw a lot of turnover. I'm kind of curious to see what they're going to get in Ricks heading into year 3. I think he still has a very high ceiling. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, the Eagles did make a signing today, bringing in another edge rusher. And I think this is a notable signing. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options have not worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. It's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/lockedon. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. The Philadelphia Eagles were busy at work today getting into the NovaCare complex, preparing for training camp. General Manager Howie Roseman was also busy at work adding more bodies to this roster for training camp. The Eagles agreed to a 1-year deal with former Cleveland Browns edge rusher, and I'm going to try to get this name right throughout the year if he makes the team and has a role. It's Ogbo Okoronkwo. Okoronkwo is a guy that actually just a month ago on this show, when he was released by Cleveland, that I said would be an interesting option to bring in as competition to this edge group that has a very high ceiling, as I've said multiple times on the show, but also a very, very, I don't want to say very, very low floor. But Nolan Smith just broke out last year, but we only have like a 15-game sample size of him being a stud. We'll see if he continues that trajectory this year. I think he's going to, but who knows? He's only in year 3, year 2 with a prominent role in this defense. Jalix Hunt really flashed at the end of the year, especially in the playoffs, but it was, 6 to 7 game sample size, and now they're expecting him in year 2 to be a top 2 guy in this rotation. Azeez Ojulari and Joshua Uche, they have past production, both former second-round picks that have gotten to the quarterback and have had good sack numbers, but Azeez Ojulari has a lengthy injury history. Joshua Uche was a healthy scratch last year and kind of played his way out of the starting lineup in New England, then was a healthy scratch when he got moved over to the Kansas City Chiefs. So, the ceiling's really high. Again, Ojulari has been a player that, when healthy, consistently has at least 6 sacks a year, 6 to 8 sacks in a season. Uche has had a double-digit sack season. Jalix Hunt's ceiling is through the roof. Nolan Smith, I think, can be a star in the NFL if he continues to play like he did down the stretch last year. But who knows what you're going to get? And oh, by the way, Uche and Ojulari are only on 1-year contracts with little to no guarantees. So I think adding another player with some proven production to this very young, high-variance group makes a lot of sense. And although Ogbo Okoronkwo has kind of regressed year after year, 5 sacks in 2022, 4.5 in 2023, 3 sacks in 2024, that's still pretty solid pass rushing production. Like, that's pretty good sack production. 12.5 sacks in the last 3 years, is pretty good for a guy that, again, is going to be like the 4th or 5th player in this rotation, or is going to battle at least for a 53-man roster spot with Josh Uche and 7th-round pick Antoine Powell-Ryland. I just like adding, if you're going to take this approach where you're going to go cheaper, you're going to have low-risk, high-reward signings, but the likelihood that those signings hit is not as likely as if you went with a more expensive, proven player. Again, Howie Roseman kind of went bargain bin shopping for the depth of this edge group. If you're going to take that strategy, I'd like to throw a bunch of darts at the wall, though. If I'm going to sign a 1-year player that's fallen out of favor with another team and has little to no guaranteed money, I would like to do that a couple times. I like that he didn't just do that with Azeez Ojulari, but he's also doing it with Joshua Uche. He also did draft Antoine Powell-Ryland, who had 16 sacks last year out of Virginia Tech, and now he's doing another 1-year deal with a player that has some past production in Okoronkwo. I think that's a good strategy because of those 4 guys, you really just need one of them to be a solid rotational player because last year, Vic Fangio was very content with running a 3-man rotation at edge. It was Nolan Smith and Josh Sweat, and then Jalix Hunt as that 3rd guy. Brandon Graham was injured, and Bryce Huff was a healthy scratch after he came back from injury. So if he wants to run a 3-man rotation again, and we assume that Hunt and Smith are going to be legit players this year, they just need one of those other 4 guys to get you 5 to 7 sacks this year to be a solid situational pass rusher. And I think based on law of averages and the talent and pass production these guys have and the track record Vic Fangio has with this defensive scheme, I think one of them will pan out, right? So I just like throwing more darts at the wall so there's a better chance that one of them sticks. And I think there's a good chance at least a couple of these guys are going to produce. Azeez Ojulari, we know when he's on the football field, he's going to produce. So I think the Eagles have at least 3 guys to rely on because Ojulari's just got to stay healthy. If he does, I would assume he gets 5 to 7 sacks this year. He had that production last year, and he was the 3rd guy behind Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. Joshua Uche, who knows what you're getting, but the guy did have 10 sacks in a season. Okoronkwo, 3 sacks last year, 4.5 the year before, 5 sacks the season before. That's solid production. Antoine Powell-Ryland, if he is just asked to get to the quarterback and third and long, obvious pass rushing situations. Could he be a steal of a day 3 pick? I think so. Again, I don't know if any of these guys are long-term pieces this year, and maybe they have to add another guy next year through a big trade or signing or draft pick. But I do think the Eagles have enough right now for this season while they figure out what they have in Jalix Hunt. Again, Jalix Hunt is the real Jenga piece here, because if he doesn't produce this season, I don't think any of these other guys are good enough to be a top 2 player in a rotation. Then the Eagles are going to have to put a significant resource into the edge rushing position in the 2026 offseason. But if Jalix Hunt pans out and he is a top 2 guy with Nolan Smith, like he was at the end of last year, where he was really producing and starting to show star potential, then I think the depth chart behind them is fine. I think Ojulari, Okoronkwo, Uche, and Powell Ryland is a fine group, and you still have Patrick Johnson there as well. So I like this signing. I like the approach that Howie Roseman is taking right now. When you have a very expensive roster, this is just the reality of what you have to do. You just have to hit on some of these signings, and I like making a bunch of them. And it's not like he's spending a lot of money. I mean, these guys are making little to no money on these contracts from a guaranteed perspective. So I'm a fan of the signing. I mentioned it last month as a move I would like when he was released by Cleveland. And again, I'm not predicting Okoronkwo as a legit player this year, but I am predicting one of these 4 guys is going to be solid in this defense. All right, guys, we're going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Coming up next, I have a take about the NFC. I think the contenders that we all think are going to battle the Eagles this year, right now it looks like they're in shambles, and I don't know if they're going to be the teams when it's all said and done pushing the Eagles to represent the NFC in Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco this year. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come with your workday. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs or, as much as I want to, take endless vacations, but we can start small. Oh, and I'm not saying I want to quit the podcast. I have another day job as well that I'd love to take endless vacations for. Whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help you navigate life's challenges, that's where BetterHelp can come in. Therapy can help you set healthier boundaries at work so stress doesn't spill over into the rest of your life. Did you ever wish that you just had more time to schedule appointments? Well, BetterHelp has the flexibility of online therapy. It makes it easy to fit sessions into a very busy schedule, no matter where you are. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners are going to get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/lockedon for 10% off their first month of online therapy. And guys, today's show is also sponsored by America's #1 sportsbook. That's right, it's FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, high-stakes soccer action, NFL futures, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups all summer long, whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning. FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel? Well, new customers, you can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Football season is here. The Philadelphia Eagles reported to training camp today at the NovaCare Complex, so we'll have practice recaps for you all throughout the week. The Eagles trying to repeat as Super Bowl champions in 2025, trying to represent the NFC for the third year in the last 4 seasons this February in San Francisco. To do it, I think there are some good teams in the NFC that are going to be battling them. And I think a lot of the obvious picks to push the Eagles in the NFC Championship to potentially represent the NFC in the Super Bowl this year are teams like the Detroit Lions. I think the Washington Commanders are betting favorites because Jaden Daniels is already, I think, one of the best quarterbacks in the world. He had maybe the best rookie season in NFL history, or at least it's certainly top 3. The other ones I can think of, like Andrew Luck's rookie year, was pretty incredible. RG3s was pretty good in Washington too, like Cam Newton. There's been a lot of good ones, but I think Jaden Daniels is probably number one, right? So they're seen as an obvious contender to push the Eagles. I think the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC East are seen as a team with Dak Prescott healthy as a top 3 team in the division to push for the NFC East crown. Remember, no team has repeated as NFC East champions since the Eagles in, I believe, 2004, right? So people, I think some are betting on the Dallas Cowboys too as like a sleeper with good odds. Like if you want to get the most bang for your buck with an NFC East pick, maybe it's Dallas. But when you look at these teams that I think the consensus love, the national media loves, maybe the national fan base of the NFL love, I think a lot of them have some imploding ability, have regression written on their forehead. I am bullish that the teams the Eagles need to worry about the most in the NFC are not Washington. They're not Detroit. I think it's probably the Los Angeles Rams. I will stand by that take earlier this offseason that they're the second best team in the NFC. And I wouldn't be surprised if like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Atlanta Falcons, one of these like other surprise teams end up becoming this year's version of the Commanders, or the San Francisco 49ers on a last place schedule getting healthy. I know they're a top 2 team in the NFL when it comes to average age of their starters. They're one of the oldest teams in football. But I wouldn't be surprised this year if they stay healthy, if they bounce back. Like they still have a really good roster on both sides, and they have a much easier schedule because of how bad they regressed last year. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's not Detroit this year pushing the Eagles, if it's not Washington, certainly if it's not Dallas. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest. Like, look at all the headlines this week about those potential contenders in the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys, I mean, Jerry Jones just called out Micah Parsons and Dak Prescott in his press conference yesterday. They're in a contract dispute with Micah Parsons, so there's a lot of distractions, as always, going on in Jerry world. The Washington Commanders have still not gotten a deal done with Terry McLaurin. He's holding out. Washington is one of the old, I mentioned San Francisco is a top 2 old team in the NFL. Washington is the oldest team in the NFL. I do not think, like, they're going all in on winning right now, but I think they're going a little bit too far with not putting in sustainable core pieces for the long term for Jaden Daniels. And I could see them being a team that regresses badly this year, that kind of overplayed expectations last season and maybe deal with injury issues because of how old they are. And Jaden Daniels kind of has to carry the load. Like, I don't think Washington is a top 3 team in the NFC. And then Detroit, like, I think they are, but they're dealing with a lot. Their defensive line is dismantled. Like, they're kind of suffering from what the 2018, 2019, 2020 Eagles did, where it's like, man, this contender just cannot catch a break. They are so banged up, and the injuries just continue to pile on and pile on. And it's like they can't get up to the surface for air. Like, they're just drowning with injuries. One of their top defensive linemen, Larry Oz, out for the year. Aiden Hutchinson coming off a super serious leg injury. Aiden McNeil is not back into the starting lineup until Ali McNeil, I should say, until November. And that's one of their 3 best, like their top 3 defensive linemen either are out for the year, out until November, or they're not 100% heading into the start of the regular season. And they already had defensive line issues last year. Maybe they bring in like a Zadarius Smith to come back for another year, but Detroit's in trouble. And then you had Dan Campbell talking today in his press conference about how they're starting jobs that are wide open on their offensive line. Like, if you have starting battles, a couple of them at least, on your offensive line heading into the year, I normally see that as a red flag. So I'm just saying, I think that, like, everyone's talking about, can the Eagles repeat? Can they run it back and avoid the suffering of the 2023 team, the 2020 or 2018 team that both had Super Bowl hangovers, making the Super Bowl and being hungover at least for 2023. But I think you look at the other teams at the top from FanDuel's odds. Detroit, like, I think they could regress this year. Washington, I think, is going to regress this year. Dallas, I think they're an absolute mess. Like, I think the Eagles, who we need to be worried about in the NFC this year, I think it's the Rams. I think the 49ers are going to bounce back. I would not count them out. And then I think one of those teams in the NFC South, Tampa Bay, who has the Eagles number, and I think their roster looks really good right now, they could be a problem. The Atlanta Falcons, if Michael Penix ends up at least being like a Tua level player, their roster could be a problem as well. I just think the Eagles are going to have to deal with some teams that maybe we're not expecting in the NFC. And I think it's good news right now that a lot of these other contenders at the top, it feels like they're dealing with some distractions heading into training camp, and the Eagles really are not, at least as of right now. So that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds and at DiBiase LOE. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Until tomorrow, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.